So the first one who would present is Dr. Brenda Gallie, who is
Okay, so I'm really happy to be joining One RB World. I'm sorry that I'm in Northern Ontario driving a car to Calgary from Toronto. So that's why I have a poor connection and I've dropped into the meeting whenever I could connect. I'm going to talk about the phase 1 clinical trial that we are running with the Hospital for Sick Children as sponsor. It is a test of chemoplaque, which is a sustained release of chemotherapy for retinoblastoma. So the chemotherapy is a common drug used for retinoblastoma, but it's not given over the few minutes that the tumor would be exposed to topotecan if it were given systemically or intraarterially. Instead, it is maintained exposure over 42 days. The sponsor of the trial is the Hospital for Sick Children. There's tremendous support from the company that has made this beautiful little device, 3T Ophthalmics, and they provide the devices and other support. But the real support to run the clinical trial at SickKids is 3 charities: After the Glow, the Guerin Family Cancer Center at SickKids, and Uplifting Athletes, and they provide tremendous support. We have no financial or conflicts of interest to declare. The study I'm talking about is version 4 of the protocol. Version 1 started earlier, and version 4 was finalized in March 31, 2021. Eligible are participants, and we call them participants, not patients, because they're participants who volunteered to join the study. They have to be under 18 years of age. And what they have is either active residual or recurrent intraocular retinoblastoma after they've had first-line therapies, which is basically systemic or intraarterial chemotherapy. And they have now groups B, C, D, retinoblastoma at diagnosis with no previous treatment. And so far, there are only 2 participants in that category. And they have visual potential in the eye that has the retinoblastoma. Excluded from this clinical trial are children with suggestion of risk of tumor extension beyond the eye, metastatic disease, or suspicion of trilateral retinoblastoma. The study design is a phase 1, meaning it's testing the first test to specifically look for toxicity of a new therapy. And it's a dose escalation clinical trial. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. It's 1 center, just SickKids, single arm, there's not controlled, not randomized, and not unblinded. And so it's just every child participant has the same therapy. At week 0, the chemoplaque is inserted and kept in for 6 weeks and then removed, and followed for 21 days for scoring toxicity that might be observed in the participants from this novel way to give chemotherapy. And then the follow-up, which is reporting outcomes, recurrences, and toxicity, goes on for 3 years. The next slide shows this little device. Oh, I'm sorry, the topotecan word has covered up the chemoplaque. But there is the yellow inside the cup, which is a silicone device about as big as your baby fingernail. And it's fastened to the eye with tissue glue, tissue adhesive, which is really crazy glue that's colored blue. And you can see it's being held in the little forcep and placed between the inferior rectus and the lateral rectus muscle on dry sclera. And then it's held there for 3 minutes to let the glue set. And then 2 small sutures pull up tissues that you're seeing being opened up there, and that closes it up so it isn't exposed, it isn't in the child's way, and we don't see it, no one sees it. It's sort of halfway back on the back of the eye. That takes about 25 minutes to put it in. The escalating doses are first 0.6 milligrams, and then a separate shaped device that had 0.9 in it. And then we now have gone to 1.2 milligrams but we get that by putting in 2 0.6s. The next doses we haven't reached yet are 1.5 milligrams and 1.8 milligrams. The results to date, these are very preliminary results because the study is not finished. The children, the participants who got 0.6 milligrams at week 9, in other words, the end of the toxicity evaluation, 5 of 8 had complete remission. So as far as we could tell, the disease was completely inactive. 2 of the 8 had progressive disease at that moment and were appropriately treated with standard care. 1 participant had the chemo plaque removed early because the parent became concerned and wanted to go to standard care. At last follow-up for this cohort 1, 3 of the 5 who were in complete remission remained in complete remission, and 2 of the 5 had recurrences at week 61 and 53 that have been treated with standard care. We to 0.9 milligrams. The dose-limiting toxicity showed up in 1 participant that had scleritis and uveitis while the chemoplaque was inserted, and that resulted in hospitalization because no one could tell what was actually wrong with this little girl who wouldn't eat and wanted to sleep and didn't want to do anything. Every test done on her was totally normal until we put her under anesthetic and could see the scleritis, and I'll show you some pictures of her. At week 9, 7 of the 7 in cohort 2 at week 9, were in complete remission. But at last follow-up, there's been 1 recurrence which occurred at week 28. Cohort 3, we've only put on 1 patient, and that participant has not yet reached week 9. And there's a partial response evident. So this is participant 1 at the 0.6 dose, and the main tumor was very unusual that it's very close to the front of the eye, and that you see on the left side at week 0, where you see this white mass, which is actually anterior to the retina, but in a location that rarely retinoblastoma can occur, and you see little bits of tumor coming out from it, sort of radiating out from it. And then up in the corner of that first slide, the top one, you see little white dots, and those are actually right behind the iris on the edge of the lens, including the ones at the bottom that Ashwin just pointed to. We couldn't be sure this was retinoblastoma, but we did confirm the diagnosis by taking some fluid from the anterior chamber of the eye, and you can see that where that points to in the ultrasound biomicroscopy view of the tumor and the anterior chamber with the red arrow pointing to where we observed that there were both RB1 alleles were damaged in that cells, the tumor cells from this tumor. That made the diagnosis of retinoblastoma. And you see a little picture of another sample, which we didn't have enough of to look at molecularly, but that has the little purple blob, sort of like a little octopus there, is actually tumor cells that were harvested from one of these little nodules on the edge of the lens. That child is still in complete remission. That was the first participant in this study. And now we're at last follow-up is 64 weeks, but the image I'm showing on the right is week 30, and there isn't much change since then. And the next slide is a child that did not do so well. This is participant 2, also 0.6. And its target lesion was a recurrence of retinoblastoma, shown in the upper left at week 0, where target number, it's called target number 1, and the yellow arrow points to the gray fuzzy part on top of calcium. And that's the recurrence after he had responded to previous therapies. And for weeks, the next picture over is a picture of this calcified lesion, which had responded to the chemoplaque, and at weeks 9, 13, et cetera, up to 51, was in complete remission. But at week 61, we observed a recurrence, which you see on the bottom image with the yellow arrow representing active tumor pointing to the recurrence. So he has another normal eye. It seemed far the best thing at this point. He failed twice, many times failed, recurring on calcium. And so we went to standard therapy, which was removing his eye, rather than giving him more risk of recurrent tumor. The next slide shows, this shows a very good response in participant 5, also 0.6 dose. And he'd had multiple treatments for a tumor right out near the front of the eye, but in retina. And it's got the yellow arrow pointing to this very nasty tumor. If we'd done more focal therapy for this, we would have spread the tumor and caused vitreous seedings and many more complications. So at that point, participant 5 went with the chemoplaque, and you can see at week 23, you can see a flat scar, although it doesn't look flat because the only way you can see this part of the retina is by pushing it from the outside, of course, under anesthetic. And that's target 1, and you can see there's no active tumor there. And in the drawings below, this is the standard way ophthalmologists have recorded active retinoblastoma since the 1950s, with yellow indicating active tumor and the drawing of the retina and the optic nerve and the center of vision. And where the yellow tumor was, it's just gray because that's just scar. And in this, you very clearly see in this child the chemoplaque scar, because as the topotecan penetrates through the sclera from where it's glued on, it does damage retina and choroid, and eventually that turns into a scar like you see here. So the next slide, this is the first slide of the same participant 6. And the timeline across there shows that he had a group DI, that's the top line, and all the treatments he'd had. There's a gap because we have no knowledge of his treatments in that gap, but this started in 2014. At that time, the eye we put the chemoplaque on was a group A, a small tumor way up in the corner of this eye. But despite all the treatments he had, including ultimately external beam radiation, this tumor could not be controlled. And when he came to us, you can see all the yellow arrows point to on his very large scar in the top of his remaining left eye. All the yellow arrows pointed to active tumor, which we could confirm with optical coherence tomography. And the drawing shows very clearly the yellow parts, which are all active tumor. This is his only eye with relatively good vision, and the next steps conventionally were to remove his only eye. So instead, he came to Toronto and we put on the chemoplaque, and that was on conventionally for the 45 days. Here you can see that the up to week 37, which is when we last saw him, but he will be back in a few weeks for us to see him in Toronto. He was not local, so it's been difficult getting him back to be seen here because of COVID. But you can see there's no more yellow there at all. He's had a complete response. And apart from problems from the complications of having external beam radiation to this eye, he's doing really well.
So what we see here is participant 10, and that's showing week 0 that has active tumor over calcium. The yellow arrow points to that in the top left image. And during treatment, that's during week 5 to 6, we see a vitritis, which was noted down as an adverse event. And this is the patient that required hospitalization. Yes,
I could say this is our only dose limiting toxicity. And it's dose limiting because by the definition, if a child's admitted more than 24 hours to hospital while in that toxicity 9 weeks that we're scoring, then it's called dose limiting. It didn't actually limit the dose, but she was admitted to hospital, as I think I mentioned earlier, because no one could figure out what was wrong with her, and they were afraid she might have recurrent tumor in her brain or something. And in fact, she was, once we diagnosed the vitritis, you could see in that image at 5 to 6, we couldn't see the tumor at all. We couldn't see in to evaluate the tumor. And we treated her with steroid, which was placed beside the eye, and she quickly responded. By week 7. We could see much better, but we still couldn't see the area that now has a little blood on top of it, that we couldn't see that to evaluate it well. But by week 9, we can see still there's some blood there. And then by week 17, and certainly at week 26, we see where the tumor had been, it's very nicely regressed. And the green circle is the location of the chemoplaque. And that concerned us when it was first observed and not recognized to be this chemoplaque, because we were concerned that little white patch might be recurrent tumor. But fluorescein angiogram indicated that it did not pick up the fluorescent dye and was unlikely to be that. And then it just has only gotten better and better and better. So there's no long-term adverse events of this vitritis. But this is very interesting because in all the children, they have varying degrees of irritability. They may not sleep as well, and they may not eat as well, and they may have photophobia. In other words, be upset with bright lights while they have the chemoplaque in place. But that starts to get better about 3 days before we take it out because it's run out of drug. So we think that that's caused by the topotecan moving through the sclera into the eye, where it also damages the choroid, but only locally, and the retina, as I showed in the scar.
Yes, so we do see the images of participant 15. And what we do see is the primary group C tumor at week 0, which means the tumor occupied a large part of the macula with retinal detachment that was surrounding it as well, which is not very evident in this image. And as we see, this child went on to receive.
Okay, so you could see at week 2, we have an ultrasound that actually shows the chemoplaque in place. And it looks like it's right under the tumor, but it's not actually right under it. It's down beside it, but quite close to it, because this child was only 2 months old. So the eye was very small relative to the size of the chemoplaque. And at week 6, we had a very nice response, but at week 6 on the OCT, optical coherence tomography, you can see there's a little nubbin and a little bit of stuff out in vitreous, and that soft little thing there would still be active tumor considered at week 6. But nicely, the tumor and the calcification have pulled away from the optic nerve, and there's a little tiny bit of retina there. So we don't need to be worried about the optic nerve having tumor involvement, although it was almost overhanging the optic nerve at diagnosis. And then at week 18, this is the last time we've seen her, the tumor is really, really dry and flat. And you can see how large the chemoplaque scar is in this eye because of the very small size of the eye. So we are hoping that 3T ophthalmics can make a physically smaller chemoplaque for the very tiny eyes.
Yeah, we're at the next slide here, which talks about the next steps. And the first point there is to continue on to cohort 3 and 4.
So we've only put one child on cohort 1, and it's not yet reached 9 weeks. So I didn't include him in this this participant in this study, in this report, preliminary report. But thinking further, this chemoplaque in this study delivers topotecan, a standard drug. And we've had recurrences, as I showed you earlier, in complete remission and then late recurrence, which is the big problem in retinoblastoma. You think with any treatment, you think everything's great, but we have to keep watching these eyes very, very closely, no matter what therapy, standard or chemoplaque. And we've had recurrences more in cohort 1, but that makes sense because they're longer ago. There's more time for recurrences. So we hope there'll be fewer of those from the cohort 2 at the higher dose of 0.9. And we want to keep going and finish the other doses unless we get any serious toxicity, which we have not observed yet. And then, of course, there could be other drugs put in the chemo plaque for different purposes, novel therapies for therapies maybe molecularly discovered, but too toxic to give systemically to people with cancer. And they might be perfect for the chemo plaque for radiation, for retinoblastoma. And also anti-inflammatory drugs, because you could think maybe you could put the therapy and some steroid in the chemo plaque to reduce the impact on causing scleritis and uveitis. I'm just dreaming here. There's no one writing these proposals yet. And of course, this chemo plaque design will be most certainly a therapy for other diseases, for example, eye diseases that need steroid to control chronic vision threatening, highly irritable diseases could be delivered with the chemo plaque. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope there's questions, but I'll let Ashwin lead those because of my poor connection. Thank you.
Right. So the second presentation is, I think, Pernille, who's on.
Thank you, Ashwin, for giving me the opportunities to present a study on the Danish RB survivorship clinic. Before I start, I have to express my impression with you, Ashwin, and Brenda doing a dual presentation. Brenda on the road, that was nicely done. So the role of regular follow-up at the Danish RB survivorship clinic. The questions to be discussed are: what are the specific needs of survivors of retinoblastoma? What is the value of retinoblastoma survivorship clinic, and why these questions? Before I move on, I want to say that we didn't start the Danish retinoblastoma survivorship clinic until 5 years ago. We started it because we experienced there was an unmet need, especially at that point, from the parents of retinoblastoma children. It was especially the children with the heritable RB, where we found that there was many concerns regarding second cancer risk, etc. So we started doing it, offering survivorship, and we didn't have a specific model of doing it. So we have adapted our retinoblastoma survivorship clinic after the perceived needs. But were we doing it correctly? How was it actually interpreted and perceived of the survivors? We started with examining the adult survivors' needs and the perceived role of follow-up at our clinic. It ended up with this recently published article that you can see a photo of in the corner. The method in our study examining the role of the RB survivorship clinic was a qualitative study where all adult survivors at our with heritable RB were recruited from our RB survivorship clinic at Aarhus University Hospital. 10 survivors, adult survivors, participated in individual explorative semi-structured interviews. We performed thematic data analysis on all the interviews that were audio recorded. Performing this thematic analysis, we ended up with 5 key themes. Not surprisingly, vision and vision impairment was one of the most important themes, though the group of participants had a very variable degree of vision impairment. We also found the theme of social life that was correlated to both the vision impairment but also the physical appearance of their condition. Many of the heritable survivors having received radiation in early childhood, living with an artificial eye, etc., played an important role for several participants. Also family, the risk for retinoblastoma in future children had an important impact on a survivor's life. The second cancer risk in heritable retinoblastoma obviously also played an important role, depending on whether the survivors had experienced a second cancer themselves or had experienced it in a family member. However, we did find that the second cancer risk might not play a high or large a role as we would have anticipated, but I will get back on that. Then finally, we asked about the role of the healthcare system when you are living with retinoblastoma. We specifically found a theme on what is the role of a specialist at the eye department and what is the role of a coordinator, specifically in the setting of the RB survivorship clinic. And the latter I will dig a little into. So the value of the RB survivorship clinic, this RB coordinator, was one of the recurring themes in the interviews. The value of having a person that would look at RB as a lifelong condition and a condition impacting many aspects of life, not just vision, but also second cancer risk, family planning, etc. We addressed the theme cancer risk in order to find out, would we actually create more anxiety by seeing the survivors at regular intervals at our clinic? Would we help them be a fighter for their own health in the healthcare system? What was the actual benefits as it comes to cancer risk? We also addressed or identified the theme of psychosocial support and the need for psychosocial support, which definitely can be improved. And then genetic knowledge, the need for recurrent genetic counseling regarding the risk in offspring, what was appreciated by survivors. So the main value of the RB survivorship clinic was identified as a comprehensive approach and a contact person and coordinator in the healthcare system. One participant statement was, "I just clap my hands when there's more focus on RB and knowledge about RB. That is exactly what I have been missing, and I can't imagine that I'm the only one missing that." Regarding the cancer risk, we concluded that better knowledge on second cancer risk was a direct result of participating in the RB survivorship clinic. It was indeed appreciated as beneficial with the coordinator facilitator regarding the cancer risk, for example, in the need of additional examinations. And we also found that balancing knowledge of second cancer risk and the psychosocial effect of knowing could be a problem. There is an ambivalence of knowing. This before mentioned concern the psychosocial burden of knowing about a risk. But we found that participants indeed cope well and preferred being able to be proactive, despite this ambivalence of knowing when it came to the cancer risk. We did identify a need for increased psychosocial focus and support in RB survivors. We found that it is beneficial with RB patient organizations. However, there was not a very high demand for this. One participant's statements regarding the patient's organizations and her perceived need of easier access to patient organizations to other RB survivors was, "I would still be interested in meeting others. I think it could be interesting and giving. It could give another perspective of how they have been doing. I always find it inspiring to hear what others have done with their life and what has affected them." Regarding the genetic knowledge and the genetic counseling, the participant valued the repetitive genetic counseling as part of the RB survivorship clinic. One participant's statement was that it's easy to second guess, but then I might have known more about how big the risk for RB actually is and what other options there are, or are there other options. This was a statement for a participant that had started her family long time before us starting the RB survivorship clinic and not actually being aware of reproductive opportunities. Of course, the little number of participants, only 10 adult survivors of heritable retinoblastoma, is a limitation of this study. Heritable RB is a genetic condition with great variability, so it would be nice to explore even deeper the differences in perspectives regarding attending an RB survivorship clinic. It's a quite narrow age group we have been studying, a young age group, so we might have underestimated the burden of second cancer risk, which we know is increasing over age in heritable RB. And then all the participants, they were attending the RB survivorship clinic, so they could be biased in the view and of the benefits, pro and cons, attending the clinic. And then it must be underlined that in Denmark, we are only 5.5 million inhabitants. We have free access to medical care. So the Danish setting is quite specific and can also influence the results. What we concluded from the studies is that survivors with heritable RB in general lead normal lives and participate in daily living activities, despite some restrictions. We concluded that the main value of the RB survivorship clinic is a contact person and a coordinator in the healthcare system. Continuous management and guidance after RB treatment for all different and often age-specific aspects related to heritable RB is valued. And I did put heritable in brackets because I do know that many of these findings indeed also reflect non-heritable RB. However, this was a study that we had to do a bit more narrow. We found and concluded that there is a significant need for coordination and specialized management of the complex late effects of treatment, long-term complications in retinoblastoma. So we indeed found that heritable RB, non-heritable RB, should be managed as a lifelong and complex condition. It is mandatory to take a multidisciplinary approach so we can cover all aspects of the condition. Psychosocial evaluation and appropriate intervention when needed is required. Is important to support RB survivors to develop coping skills, compensatory skills, and build resilience. But we have to remember that we are all different individuals. We are perceiving our condition differently, so we need to take an individual approach. We did find that sharing of peer-to-peer experience may be facilitated in the setting of the RB survivorship clinic could be beneficial, although we didn't hear that as clearly expressed from the participant. It was mainly our perception of the interviews. There still remains many unanswered questions. We did address it, some of the other speakers early on tonight addressed how about the transition from childhood to adulthood. I think there was a question on it. So how do we address the age-specific needs? How do we transition from childhood to adult care? And how are we talking about the child becoming an adult, about the condition without doing an over medicalization? How do we ensure an individual approach and in general avoid an excessive medicalization? So this work could not be done without a collaboration with Sandra in Melbourne, who has been a great friend and partner in performing it, and the rest of the Danish team that is mentioned below. But the Danish retinoblastoma survivors and their families are the most important. Again, thanks to the International RB Society for making us sharing experiences across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pernille. I think we'll move on to the next one and take questions in the end as well. And the next one is a pre-recorded presentation by Didi, Fabian, who couldn't be here today for this session.
Thank you for the invitation to speak on RB management during the COVID pandemic. My name is Didi Fabian, and I'm from Sheba Medical Center in Israel, and also affiliated to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the UK. The coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, has rapidly evolved in early 2020 into a pandemic and global crisis, resulting in medical resources being shifted to crisis management. We all know that RB, the most common pediatric eye cancer, is a life-threatening condition. In recent years, the prognosis of patients with retinoblastoma in high-income countries has reached a nearly 100% survival rate. Now, anecdotal evidence back in early 2020 suggested that retinoblastoma management might be compromised due to change in policies during the pandemic, risking the children's life. The Global Retinoblastoma Study Group was initiated in 2017. It includes most RB treatment centers across the world, and this is what you see here in this picture. Its first study investigated the stage at presentation and time of diagnosis of patients across the world in 2017, and we published our findings in JAMA Oncology just last year. In January 2020, when there were only rumors about COVID in China, we got back to the centers and asked for the 3-year outcome data. A couple of months later, reports of disaster and panic came from Italy, Spain, and later also from the US, and we thought it would be more appropriate to postpone the outcome study and instead investigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on RB management in treatment centers across the world. We designed a 14-item survey that was sent to centers on March 29 and returned a week later. In the meantime, we retrieved COVID data from the WHO database. Because it was only a survey, we did not ask for a IRB or ethical clearance. And in terms of analysis, it was only descriptive analysis. We managed eventually in less than a week to enroll 194 centers from 94 countries. A few centers did not make it to the deadline. And here's the map you can see with the distribution across the world. All continents were included, so each bar represented another continent: Asia, Europe, Africa, Australasia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and North America. As one would expect, most cases and most centers were from Asia. This was the COVID situation on April 4th, 2020, so all positive cases with high rates in the US and several West European countries and China. And these are the associated deaths during this week, from the end of March until April 2020. And with your permission, I will move now to the answers, the answers to this survey. So the first question was, are families restricted from traveling to or entering the RB center? This, in fact, was the only question related to the situation outside the retinoblastoma center rather than in the center. And the answer was that in nearly 50%, the caregivers reported that there were travel restrictions. A series of questions about referrals. The first one was regarding policy for new referrals. And nearly 90% of the answers were that these children were examined and treated, 12% were deferred. What about policy for children with retinoblastoma having treatment, active treatment? So in a similar manner to the previous question, nearly 100% received treatment, were examined and received treatment. And what about stable patients? So this could be defined differently by different centers, but overall, nearly 60% of the cases were deferred. The next question was regarding disruption in RB management during COVID-19 crisis, and about 60% reported no disruption, as compared to 40%. And when you look at the details, so about 8% reported personnel quarantined or sick, 6% reported personnel needed elsewhere, 4% reported that equipment was missing because it was needed elsewhere, and about 20% reported the combination of all of these. What about examinations under anesthesia, EUAs, before and during the pandemic? So this is how we examine and treat those little children. So before COVID, EUAs were performed in 96% of the centers. During the week of the survey, EUAs were available in only 60% of the cases and partially available in 35% of the cases. Treatment modalities before and during COVID, most were available. So we have enucleation, intravenous chemotherapy, and intraarterial chemotherapy. The main difference was in this category. So it went down from 96 to 73% cases, sorry. Note also that there were centers which could not perform even enucleation surgery. And the final and concluded question was, can changes, restrictions during COVID-19 crisis impact lives of RB patients managed in your center? Kind of a summary question. And more than half reported yes. I showed you this map on an earlier slide. It's difficult to show this as part of the Zoom talk, an online Zoom talk, and a recorded one. It shows not only the participating centers, but when you click on each of these blue tags, you get a quote, a citation describing the situation in that specific center and country. For example, this is in Hyderabad in LV Prasad. This is quote by Swati Kaliki. So you can feel free after this talk to go to the website. This is the URL. And go through the quotes. It's very interesting and even touching, and I will show you just a few examples. So a center from China reported in January, February of this year, that's 2020, all RB treatments were delayed, but now our center has recovered as before. A center in Lebanon, which receives many patients from abroad, including Syria and other neighboring countries, they reported major disruption for patients traveling across borders due to travel restrictions. A center from India reported our borders are closed and public transportation is unavailable. We're keeping all treatments available, but patients are not able to reach us. I'm afraid that RB death will rise in the coming month. All in all, not good time for retinoblastoma kids. A center from the US, from North America, reported COVID things are changing week to week. Had the survey been sent last week, my answers would have been quite different. A center in Thailand reported as part of the survey during this week, no change in RB management. But a week later, the same center reported, not as part of this study, that the hospital has just announced that there will be no surgery for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Hence, all patients requiring surgery will be referred elsewhere. A center in the UK reported, we have moved the service to another hospital. That's from the Royal London Hospital to Moorfields. All patients are treated as COVID-19 positive due to lack of testing. We are using ketamine for EUA and laser therapy to avoid an aerosol generating procedure, AGP. All stable cases are being delayed. And finally, a center in the Netherlands reported we still see new patients also under general anesthesia, but it becomes more difficult to arrange as colleagues from the anesthesiology move to corona wards. So according to this survey conducted in March, April 2020, including 194 RB treatment centers in 94 countries, management of children with RB was compromised during the pandemic. We publish our findings in Pediatric Blood and Cancer as a letter to the editor. It's now October 2020. COVID's still with us. And the question whether management of RB patients, children with RB, was or still is compromised is still a valid one. I do not know the answer, and it would be difficult to study to conduct. What do we know? We got back to the centers originally from the 2017 presentation study around the second half of 2020 and asked for the outcome data. Despite the pandemic, the response rate was very good. I will spare you with the details. A few centers dropped, that's in red. A few centers and patients were added, and eventually we managed to enroll more than 4,000 patients. That's more than half of the global annual incidence of retinoblastoma. We asked for these outcomes, life, eye, and vision, but also asked whether COVID-19 had an impact on survival and globe salvage. And these data were completed for each and every patient, so 4,064 patients. Overall, in the global RB outcome cohort, there were 519 deaths. That's 12.8% of the entire cohort. Of these, 20 occurred after January 2020, so during COVID. None were reported to be associated to COVID or to a delay in treatment because of COVID. What about globe salvage, cases that underwent enucleation? So nearly 66% of the cohort underwent primary or secondary enucleation or exenteration, 40 of which were after January 2020, and here too, no association to COVID whatsoever. So although an indirect measure, but overall positive results in terms of COVID. In conclusion, it's important to investigate the real impact of COVID-19 on RB management and outcome. There's a delicate balance of risk management during a global pandemic. Treating patients, especially children, with a highly curable disease, but potentially fatal when no treatment is delivered, remains a priority, even in the face of a dangerous global viral outbreak. Finally, policymakers should be aware of the effects of broad sweeping policies and take them into account when weighing all the risks and benefits of the situation. Thank you to all the collaborators from North America, from Latin America and the Caribbean, from Africa, from Europe, and from Asia, and of course from Oceania. Thank you.
All right, thanks Didi for that wonderful presentation. I think we can move on to the next one. Didi isn't here live. I'm sure we can forward questions to him though. And the next one we have to introduce is Genevieve from the Canadian Retinoblastoma Society. Go ahead, Genevieve, who's going to talk about an overview of the society in itself.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be in front of everyone again. And thank you so much for the introduction, Ashwin. It's an honor to be on this panel with all of these lovely people and to be here in front of you again, explaining a little bit about how the Canadian Retinoblastoma Society looks and strives to support families impacted by retinoblastoma. So our mission is to provide support, advocacy, and information to those families touched by retinoblastoma. It is important to us that we are increasing awareness of RB as well as the long-term health implications that are associated with this disease and those families that are affected. Early detection is key to saving vision and lives, as it's been discussed. Only through increased awareness is this possible. And so as a means of supporting our families, we have a family support network where we would be comprised of screened survivors and their family members who would be interested in sharing their story and connecting with others to have similar experiences and who are looking to connect with other families. It was a discussion that we just had previously, and I thought I might just throw in our method in terms of connecting with newly diagnosed families. Thankfully, we do have primary hubs in Canada who are serving and meeting the needs of our RB families. So we primarily have Catherine Payton, as well as Dr. Ashwin, as well as Dr. Bruce in the East Coast. And we like to be able to use them as our primary voices through their social work departments. So that social worker would be the one to connect with our pamphlet and possibly our postcard that gives families a little bit of information about who we are. And I'm just showing here our postcard with a young baby with a glowing eye and saying know the signs with contact information for our organization. And as it also was mentioned, oftentimes this information gets passed on, and it's up to those individuals and those families on whether they're ready and feel comfortable to reach out. As much as we've been connected with many people, it's not always of their interest to share their story, or they may be very overwhelmed by what they're going through at that time. And it might take them 6 months to a year or more to reach out to us and to look for that community or their support. So through various events, we share stories and we collaborate together. We're looking to connect RB families across our country as often as we can. Due to the pandemic, we've done more virtual events. So we initiated some community Zoom calls where we would offer to our community on a certain topic, and we could just have survivors and their parents, or just adult survivors, or we've been looking to theme them around adolescence, specifically around topics, and gain some traction to these events through having some consistency in terms of times of day and monthly or time scheduled events. These are some photos on this slide of some events that we've had over the years. Of course, I have to continue to include that one of Brenda because it's just one of my faves. Dancing at one of our fundraisers years ago in Tweed in a barn. Of course, we have some Blue Jays events that we've attended. We had a family day in Calgary, as well as attending research symposiums in Toronto. Becoming an advocate and helping families to feel empowered is a very important piece of what we strive to do, and making sure that there is valid information available for them through standards of care, resources within their own communities, networking, services that can be beneficial, as well as financial opportunities, research and medical practices that are new and engaging, and of course, increasing the awareness within our own communities. And we have a common theme when we are a newly diagnosed family. Much of the jargon and the discussion is overwhelming, and some of the medical terminology can be right over people's heads, as well as they could be just glossed over in general and not be presently hearing and absorbing all of the terms that are coming forth. So we feel it's very important to be a soft landing space for some of those things, and to plain language some of the experiences, to be able to offer common terms, as well as to direct individuals towards those plain language summaries that are available through the CRAB website, that we also benefit from learning from these research endeavors, but in our own language on a more practical level for those of us that are involved. I wanted to highlight a couple of our successes. We've obviously done a lot of fundraisers, participated in applying for grants. We signed support letters and put forth interactions and opportunities to connect. Over time, we've had various things that have been successful in terms of support programs, such as telephone trees, one-on-one one-on-one interactions. Our website is helpful, social media platforms. We've done a lot of different advocacy. Brenda, I'm sure, can speak to the various opportunities that we've assisted with and been involved in over the years to help move forward the development and the genetics and the treatment forms, initiating discussions and participating in various events. And it's very important to the society to put the wellness and best health of our survivors at the forefront. And of course, I wanted to show a couple of our more recent successes, and it's not necessarily but for our community, is that we have recently had a new children's book published. This is by Talene Dorna, and I just wanted to quickly give her a shout out because she wrote this extraordinary book about her extraordinary son and his experience, and it's available on Amazon, just to give her a plug. I don't know if it still is, but I have a few copies and we lend them out through the society to help normalize our experiences. And of course, Dr. Brenda Gallie has a perfect photo, and the experience is very real for those of us that are in this community. We also were part of the formation of the My Prosthetic Eye book, which is also a resource that we make available to our families. And this was done in collaboration with Morgan Livingstone and Matthew Milne, and We See Hope as well. And it just helps children to understand and maybe see some of the processes prior to them receiving a prosthetic eye. One of the other resources that we're very proud of is some summary of research around being monocular, having singular vision. This book is called Seeing with One Eye. And this was graciously done for us by Esther Gonzalez of the U of T and Ophthalmology and Vision Sciences. She helped us to summarize into plain language some of the adaptations our brains take over time. So we have some great resources and successes that we try to make available to make sure that survivors know that there's a lot of information and valid stories. So getting involved, of course, we always, as it's been discussed, we need hands and powerful minds and voices to work together to provide more advancements in the opportunities and the programs that are being offered. So we're always looking for people to become members and receive updates from us, follow us online, participate in opportunities to volunteer, and of course, make donations to support our work and the continuation of our programs. We are at this time conducting a survey, and we thought that the timing was great with this event, that we can look for more feedback from our survivors around the world, not just our Canadian survivors, about what they would like to see from organizations like ours. So the questions that we're asking are simply, what types of supports would you prefer? Whom would you like to hear from? What types of questions would be important to you? What type of information do you need at various stages of your retinoblastoma life? So please visit our website and complete our survey to help us understand the needs of our community better and serve them the best we can. I would like to quickly acknowledge my board of directors. As some of you know, the Canadian Retinoblastoma Society has been in transition for the last few years. And I took over the presidency right at January 2020 when COVID initiated and things changed drastically. So it's been difficult for us to build. However, in that time, we've put together a lovely group of individuals who are committed to volunteer their time to ensure that this charity continues to flourish and move forward. So I just want to quickly acknowledge Natalia, Jennifer, Michelle, David, Brian, who's not with us today, and of course myself for our hard work and the time that we put forth to our meetings. And we are always seeking more individuals to be involved. And if you are interested in contributing, please visit our website or reach out. Of course, I'm happy to put my email into the chat. And again, just contact information for us. Would love to hear from you regarding your survivor stories or questions that you might have. Please follow us online on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, mention again our survey. We would love to hear from you, being the survivors and the families, even our clinicians and our researchers have a voice within what needs the survivors and the families have. Again, I very much appreciate your time for hearing me out. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions if needed.
And I'd like to invite Ivana next to talk about the Canadian Retinoblastoma Research Advisory Board, CRAB. Ivana, you're on.
So thank you very much for having me here today. I wanted to share some information with you about a really exciting resource we have created. This is a new booklet. It's called the Retinoblastoma Research in You. And this is a resource for retinoblastoma patients, survivors, and families interested in applying their lived experience and skills to influence retinoblastoma research in Canada. So I'm going to share with you some information today. I will touch on my background. I've presented at the previous One Retinoblastoma World, so I will only touch upon that for anyone who's new and hasn't met me yet. And then I will share some information about the Canadian retinoblastoma research landscape, the need for this new resource. I will share some information about this booklet and how it was created and how you can get your copy. And then after this PowerPoint presentation, I will walk you through a quick overview of the digital version. So on my slide, I am showing you 3 pictures of the booklet. There's the front cover and 2 inside pages. And I just wanted to let you know that there's a PDF accessible version of the booklet on our website, which you can see and view all the contents of the booklet. So about myself, my background is in business management. And then I got involved in retinoblastoma in 2013 when my son, Nicola, was diagnosed. He was diagnosed at 3 months old. And my interest in research started when I was thinking about giving back to the retinoblastoma community and the research community specifically. I just felt like I wanted to make some sort of contribution to the research that was done that was able to help save his life and make sure that he has a happy and healthy life. So now I'm a parent in research in Helen Damaris's research team. And the pictures that I'm showing on the slide on the left is my son at 3 months old when we started noticing there was some changes happening. His left eye is looking more inwards in this picture. He's laying on a white blanket and is wearing a white shirt with a large blue and white bow tie. The picture on the right is Nicola just a couple of weeks ago. He's 8 years old now. He's looking very happy and he's sitting beside his dog, Chloe. He's sitting in the back of our car, looking at the camera with a smile on his face and is wearing blue glasses, a gray shirt, and jean shorts. So I wanted to share with you about the Canadian retinoblastoma research landscape. And to help you visualize it a bit better, I have a picture here of 3 circles. There's the largest, I would say, orange colored circle, maybe it's more salmon colored, and the words retinoblastoma and in brackets RB community written on it. A smaller green circle is inside that larger pink one. And the green circle has the words RB research community on it. And inside that green circle is a smaller blue circle, and the words on that one have the acronym CRRAB, which stands for Canadian Retinoblastoma Research Advisory Board. So starting from the largest circle, the retinoblastoma community, this is the view that encompasses everyone who's professionally or personally connected to retinoblastoma. And then going further into the circle, the green part of that community is a smaller subset of people who are personally or professionally connected to retinoblastoma and are interested in retinoblastoma research. We invite everyone to formally join the retinoblastoma research community through our website, www.rbcanadaresearch.com. And you might have been familiar with this. We used to refer to it as the RB Research Registry. And then the further subset, the blue smallest circle, with the acronym CRRAB on it, are all those other participants from the community and interested in research and who participate in patient-partnered research and related activities and events. And the acronym stands for the Canadian Retinoblastoma Research Advisory Board, and we call it CRAB for short. And it's led by a steering committee, which is responsible for ensuring annual goals are set and progress is tracked towards patient partnership and research. And just a quick note, in my presentation specifically, when I talk about patients in research, we talk about patient partnership, but the term patient includes parents, survivors, and other family members. So it's an all-encompassing term. I also wanted to highlight that the research that we're focusing on is Canadian retinoblastoma research, but we welcome and encourage international members to sign up and to join. So the need for this new resource. A major CRAB goal is to identify and include a large and diverse group of patients in research and have them join the retinoblastoma research community. And CRAB generates awareness of and interest in patient engagement and research, which often rely on in-person events and initiatives. One of those being the retinoblastoma clinic days at the Hospital for Sick Children. And the picture on the top left here is the table that we would have at the clinic during those days. In the picture, you can see a gray table and it has items on top of it. On the left side, on top of the table, there's items for children to play with and to color. There's some coloring pages and there's markers. And on the right side of the table, oh, there's also Ellie the elephant we have. On the right side of the table, we usually have research information. So there's sign up list for the research community that we used to take manually, but we also used to bring an iPad to help people sign up right on the spot. There's information about research that is going on and just discussions that we have with families about their experience and how they can be involved. The bottom picture is of our annual retinoblastoma research symposium. It's a group of people who had attended our event, sitting on stairs, holding the banner for the saying that says Retinoblastoma Research Symposium. So at symposia such as that and other conferences is when we used to connect with families and talk to them about research and the benefits of participating. We would also they would share their stories. We would talk about upcoming events, research that is ongoing, sharing results with them, and also opportunities for them to participate in, and the importance of participating in research. So, however, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, restrictions to in-person interactions temporarily halted recruitment and engagement efforts. And the need was created for a new tool to be shared across Canada to better inform families how they can be involved in research through CRAB and why their participation will make a difference. So that's how the booklet was created. And we called it the Retinoblastoma Research in You. It was developed to encourage patients to join the Canadian retinoblastoma research community and participate in CRAB. So from conceptualization of the booklet to distribution, the patients were part of the whole process. There was a lot of discussions about the design specifically and the use of these illustrations, a lot of discussion on what should be included in the booklet and the title itself. So that everybody was involved in the whole process. So the booklet was developed over the course of several months by patients, researchers, and health professionals through monthly CRAB meetings. And then we had grant funding that supported 2 workshops to finalize a design, to hire a graphic designer, and for dissemination costs. We had 14 attendees, including parents, survivors, clinicians, researchers, and graphic designer who attended. And you can see in the image that I've included in this slide, we have a screenshot of all our participants, and they have their hands up in the air, like they're going to give each other a high five. And because we were virtual, we were just pretending to give high fives to connect with each other. So how to get your copy? I invite you to view the Retinoblastoma Research in You booklet by visiting our website. You can see the digital version there. The website is www.rbcanadaresearch.com. I will also type that in the chat after my presentation. There you'll also find the PDF version of the booklet, which is an accessible version for all who are using screen readers. And if you're in Canada, you would have received the copy with your conference package. So thank you very much for including that in the package this year. And any Canadians who would like additional copies to share, if you can send me your name and address, the email I will also include in the chat, and it is retinoblastoma.research@sickkids.ca. And I would also share that message with any Canadian health professionals who see retinoblastoma patients and would like to share this resource. You can also email me and I will connect about this opportunity. So I'm going to exit and try to navigate on the website. Perfect. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things of how to find the booklet, and to highlight that on the top bar that has all the menu links, there's one that says RB Research Community, and that's how you would access and how to join the research community. But I'm talking about the booklet. So you could see on the front page, there's the button for our booklet, or you can go under the About menu option, and the second option down is our booklet. And I just wanted to highlight at the bottom of this window that shows the booklet itself, there's the button to download the PDF version of the booklet. But I just wanted to show you a few pages inside. So I've already clicked on this, on the button to display it in full screen and got it ready. I wanted to show you what's inside. There's some information about partnering in research and the benefits. It's not just about advancing research. There's a lot of other benefits to people who participate. Of course, you make a difference to future families, but you also create connections and improve your own knowledge. I have some more information about the Canadian landscape, research landscape, like I shared previously. So I encourage you guys all to go on the website, see the booklet on your own, and join the community. And thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next one, I think, is Anna Janic, who will talk about her intended work, which is coming up on red reflexes.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna. As Dr. Malapatna said, I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Toronto. I'm really thankful that I was invited to speak today alongside all these amazing individuals that are progressing retinoblastoma research and care. So thank you so much. Today, I'm going to be talking about a project that just started up. It's called the Red Reflex Exam, Past, Present, and Future. And it's a systematic review that I'm running with Dr. Malapatna and others around the globe, actually. So I'm going to start by introducing the red reflex itself and giving you guys a bit of a background. So the red reflex is described as a red glow from the eyes, and it can be frequently seen in photographs that are taken casually at home or at social events when the lights are low or the light hits the eye just right. Looking at the image on the right over here, this is a normal red reflex, so a red glow from the eyes, and it happens when the flash from the camera goes into the eye and reflects off the back of the eye, the back layer of the eye, the retina. So looking at the image on the left, this dotted yellow circle here identifies the area of the retina that was hit by the flash and is now reflecting the light to produce that red glow. And of course, as most of us heard today, there are variations in the color of the red reflex. So that does depend on the ethnicity of the individual. So this is the red reflex, but the red reflex is elicited much better with an instrument called a direct ophthalmoscope. So this instrument is present universally, almost universally in all hospitals in developed nations. So generally, how it works is the lights in the room are dimmed and a direct ophthalmoscope with a halogen bulb. So this bulb gives off a yellowish color, a yellowish light, is set at maximum brightness with the observer sitting roughly 45 centimeters to a meter away from the patient. Usually both eyes are illuminated either together at one time or one at a time. And this schematic here is very broad. There are variations in conducting the exam. As I said earlier, the examiner can sit roughly 45 centimeters to a meter away from the patient. However, some publications reference sitting anywhere up to 4 meters away from the patient. So variability in this exam does exist. Nonetheless, the red reflex exam is important in the detection of childhood blindness and childhood eye disease, specifically relevant here in the detection of retinoblastoma. So we know that 80% of children with retinoblastoma initially present with leukoporia, which is a white reflection of light from the tumor. In this image here, here's an image, of a child with leukoporia and an abnormal red reflex here in the left eye. So the tumor in the left eye is actually blocking the retina, so we don't see that characteristic red glow. Therefore, the proper and timely performance of the red reflex exam is critical, not only for detecting ocular diseases, but also for improving treatment and vision outcomes. And to really drive this point home, here is a case of an 11-month-old boy who was previously healthy and presented to SickKids, to the SickKids emergency department in April of this year. He was urgently referred by his pediatrician due to an abnormal red reflex in the left eye. which was documented the day before. The patient was diagnosed with bilateral retinoblastoma after his presentation to SickKids, and treatment was initiated. However, if we actually follow the timeline back a while, we discovered that the patient was seen by a pediatrician virtually and in person months prior for a visual complaint. And the parents were reassured at that time that the problem would resolve on its own. It's unclear whether or not during this visit, whether or not the red reflex was performed, and if it was performed, whether or not it was performed accurately. But what is clear is that there were multiple opportunities for the red reflex to be conducted before presentation to SickKids. So this is definitely not an ideal timeline for a child with retinoblastoma. Ideally, the patient should have been referred to SickKids earlier, which might have improved their prognosis. So the red reflex exam, has been in practice for a very long time, and it is universally accepted. Because it has been around for so long, many variations of the exam exist. So as I mentioned, the issue with the distance from the observer and the patient. Practically, what this means is that the practice of the red reflex exam is not ubiquitous around the world. So even within a single city like Toronto, there are variations in how the test is performed. Currently, the evidence and impact of the exam is not collated, and therefore there are no defined standards on how to perform the exam or standards in performing these variations. So during this project, we want to identify the gold standard of the red reflex exam and collate and examine all that evidence supporting the red reflex as a pediatric screening tool. And this project is being done to make the red reflex exam more evidence-based and develop clinical guidelines. So these guidelines will, one, empower clinicians by providing them with a standardized resource on how to perform and interpret and trust the results of the red reflex test. And then two, empower parents by providing them with a resource to understand whether the exam their child received was properly done or not. So now I'm going to speak about the methods, and to achieve the goals of our project, we will be conducting a systematic review. So our review will be following standardized guidelines, and these guidelines were created by researchers to make sure that systematic reviews are done in a specific way, really to minimize bias and increase their generalizability. So very briefly, what a systematic review entails is, one, identifying a research question that needs an answer. Then searching the relevant databases for literature surrounding that question. Then screening all the literature that they identified through a two-step process, once by just reading the title and the abstract of the papers and applying inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then by reading the entire article and again applying inclusion and exclusion criteria. After that, you're left with a batch of really relevant literature from which you can extract data and analyze the data which you've extracted before you can finally disseminate that data in some sort of cohesive manner, in this case, which would be the clinical guidelines. So our question was, is there a gold standard for the red reflex exam? Yeah, so we are going to be looking at the databases listed above, and we're really looking, the terms, that we've used to identify relevant articles are any articles that look at eye examinations, red reflex, ophthalmoscopy, and Bruckner's, which are all different types of the red reflex exam in a pediatric population done by pediatricians, primary healthcare workers, so family physicians or emergency care physicians. We will be including any articles that discuss Bruckner's exams, distant direct ophthalmoscopies, red reflex, and infrared photorefraction. So these are all, again, different types of the red reflex exam. We will be including any articles that discuss at least one of the areas of interest, which I will go over briefly later. And we are including articles that discuss all of this within the context of a pediatric population. So either the article specifically includes a pediatric population or the test surrounds or is beneficial for the pediatric population. And then finally, for logistical reasons, we don't have the capacity to review any studies that are not written in English. So that is one of our inclusion criteria. We will be excluding any articles that have or publications where the primary purpose surrounds screening for retinopathy of prematurity. We will be excluding any publications that pertain to instruments only used to view the back of the eye and not discuss any of the red reflex techniques or utilities, as well as we're excluding case reports that don't really describe any of the areas of interest, again, which I will go over later. And of course, articles that are solely for, about, or beneficial to an adult population. So to extract, or the data that we will be extracting is of course general information on these publications, the characteristics of the publication, what is their aim, what was their purpose, and then other information in the publication that's relevant to us specifically, like which screening test was used. So was it a red reflex unspecified? Was it a Bruckner's test? Was it a distant direct ophthalmoscopy? And which instrument was used to conduct this test? So earlier I mentioned the direct ophthalmoscope. That is one of the potential instruments that can be used. So this is information that we now want to collect. So here are the areas of interest, which I mentioned prior. So we're really looking for, or we're interested in articles that discuss the history. So when was the test first described? Classification, so infrared photorefraction versus a conventional red reflex test, if the publication makes a distinction between those two. Any standards or legislation, so like government screening recommendations, procedures, or how to actually perform the test, drug effects or pharmacology, so utilizing dilating drops perhaps. We're also interested in the physiology or the optics, so why the red reflex occurs, and then interpretation and pathophysiology, so why is the red reflex absent, or why is the red reflex abnormal or white? More areas of interest that we're interested in are the epidemiology surrounding the tests, the statistical or the numerical data, so its reliability, its accuracy, any adverse events that have been reported with the test, diagnostic imaging, so are tests ever compared to RetCam images, for example, economics, so cost effectiveness, training or quality of improvement. Have there been any studies that look at physicians or learners who conduct the red reflex without learning about it and then get training and then conduct it again, and how their interpretation or how the results of the test vary? And then finally, utilization or feasibility, specifications. So I mentioned a halogen bulb. Are there any other specifications to the instruments required during the test, and then future trends. So we anticipate that the eligibility criteria and the selection procedure will give us a great diversity of papers and a great diversity of articles, I should say. So we're going to use a narrative analysis because this may be the best way to report our findings. And the purpose of a narrative analysis is to summarize and to explain the findings using text primarily, so looking at patterns from the data that we pull. However, we are going to adapt our data analysis based on the type of data that we actually find is coming out of these papers. So moving on to our results really quickly, they're very brief. We just started. So we ran the search initially in April of this year, and we identified 14,613 articles. And when we removed duplicates, there were actually just over 4,000 duplicates removed. And that left us with just over 10,000 articles to screen. And we started screening last Tuesday, which is awesome. And our screening team is very diverse. We have 11 medical students. So we have five from London. 5 from London. We have 11 from Toronto. And then we have 2 from Australia, 1 from Melbourne and 1 from Sydney. And again, these are all medical students that are interested in emergency medicine, family medicine, and pediatrics. And so they're also getting an education on the red reflex. And which is an interesting outcome because they themselves will be the the physicians that are most likely to utilize the red reflex as a screening tool, which is really cool. So this is just a timeline of our review. We hope to have the second phase of our screening done by started in November, and we hope to extract data in December and analyze the data in January of next year. And then in March 2020, we can actually start to disseminate these results through conferences and publications and talks. So that will be interesting. And again, just how we're going to disseminate this data. And at the end, we really hope to create clinical guidelines that, again, are going to benefit not only clinicians, but also parents, to give them a resource to check whether or not their red reflex test was performed accurately. So thank you so much for listening. A huge thanks to our whole red reflex review team and the information scientists that helped us generate our search strategy. I'm done.
Thanks, Anna. We'll hold the questions for the end if we do have time. But I do want to just point out very quickly that this project of the Red Reflex Review was a spin-off of a project that one of the priorities that CRAB has set, which is for the early detection of retinoblastoma. And this came from a CRAB meeting, the idea for this review and all of that. So what Anna is doing right now is a direct impact of how effective CRAB can be. And I'd really like to see what Anna has to say in the next meeting with all of her data in place. All right, can we go on to Sandra, who's the next presenter, who will talk about her findings, which is also relevant to early diagnosis of retinoblastoma.
There we go. Okay. So yes, thanks everyone. This is the last talk that I'm going to give. I certainly apologize that I've had to, that I have given so many presentations this past 3 days. But this is a project that I'm superbly interested in, investigating pathways to diagnosis. And again, I've been part of the Canadian Retinoblastoma Advisory Board for a couple of years now, and I've ended up the project lead for this particular study. One of the first things I did when I came back from One RB World in 2012 was I went and interviewed some of my families, because even though I'd heard their stories of this pathway, I'd never actually thought about them. And when I did collect these pathways, I realized there were some really significant barriers, one of which was obviously not recognizing that leukocoria or strabismus is a problem, or could be a problem or sign of a significant eye disease, but also the barrier of healthcare providers not recognizing or acknowledging that a squint or leukocoria that they might not see when they look at that child face to face could be the sign of something quite important. I'd like to acknowledge the research team. It's varied. We have Rochelle and Marissa as survivors, Megan Weber as a parent of a child with Coates, Serge Dorner, a parent of a child with RB, and additional researchers, Helen Demarest and Catherine Ha. And as Ashwin said regarding Anna's project, this particular project also came from the Canadian Retinoblastoma Advisory Board as a research priority, so that the results of this study will inform awareness initiatives. So the research question we've got is to identify the barriers and enablers of parents' lived experience and the referral pathway that they experience for their child's retinoblastoma diagnosis. And we know that delayed diagnosis of retinoblastoma is primarily influenced by two main factors, as I said earlier: parents not recognising or responding to these early signs, and healthcare providers not responding to the parents' concerns. And when we want to develop effective and targeted awareness campaigns, we need to first identify where is the system failing, what are the challenges that parents face. We need to understand their individual lived experiences. And this is, I guess, where some of the discussion we had earlier today on ethnography and how culturally there may be differences in how parents will respond to observing these signs, and also understand inter-country differences and recognise that one awareness program is not necessarily going to be able to be picked up and plonked into another country. That notion that one size fits all doesn't always apply, but we can learn some very important lessons looking at what other centres do in other countries. So the research plan is to survey parents or the primary caregiver of a child with retinoblastoma. It will be a mixed methods approach, and by that we mean there'll be quantitative data, excuse me, that will be collected, so we'll count stuff, and qualitative data where we will interview people. So we're going to ask people not just to fill in a survey and tick check boxes, but also to write their stories, and that's the qualitative data. And we may extend that by conducting some small focus groups to explore some issues that we identify in depth, and that interest will be canvassed during the survey. A link to the survey will be used and circulated probably through SurveyMonkey or perhaps RedCap, and parents will be asked to complete the survey. Their responses will be completely anonymous. We will prefer not to have any identifying features, and there will be no information that will enable us to track the answers back to an individual. If people want to be able to receive directly information about the outcomes of this study, there will be an opportunity to include your email address later on at the end of the survey, but it's not essential. Invitation to participate will be circulated on the various RB websites and research registries around the world, not just in Canada, around the world. RB Facebook pages, both open and closed ones, if the parent members who are participating in these Facebook pages feel it's appropriate to put them there. Initially, we may just have the survey available in English. We've had lots of discussions about having it available in other languages so that we can really drill down and explore, are there differences in different countries, disseminating through CACS, which is a German organisation, Retinostop, which is European, as well as other international retinoblastoma sites. Maybe we'll just start with English speaking and then perhaps have it translated. I'm sure we could perhaps engage people in our broader community for French, Spanish, Asian languages to conduct the study in different languages and then retranslate their answers back into English so we can analyze it. But we don't want to lose any information when we do translate things, because sometimes the true meaning can be lost in translation. And as Anna suggested in her previous presentation, you know, utilising medical students who are a very valuable resource in progressing research, perhaps they will be able to translate the surveys back into English if that's the pathway we go down. So in terms of progress, it has been a slow progress, I guess, really in the big picture of it, really. But we have had many challenges with COVID and its added workload for all of us, particularly me. But all of us, we all have added work to do, and we all do this work in a voluntary capacity. But the progress we've made is we've sort of got the survey pretty much sorted. These are just some screenshots of what the survey looks like and some of the questions that are going to be asked in the survey, and how we will go about obtaining information that we will count quantitatively. So what year your child was born, what country, what year they were actually diagnosed, and what countries they were diagnosed in, because we recognise in some places that's not necessarily the same place, what signs that they observed, and then we will then ask for, as I said earlier, the story. And there are some questions that will prompt the participant filling in the survey how to write their story and include all the information that we're actually interested in. So the survey's pretty much been developed and tested. The ethics application is where we've stopped, and that's at my end at the moment. And now that One RB World is almost over, I can go back to working on this again. Hopefully we'll launch this survey in the new year, perhaps with International Childhood Cancer Day on the 15th of February. So stay tuned. We would like to think that we'll be able to circulate the survey link through this organisation or any other organisations that people are participating in, and ignore what I said, present results next year in Ottawa, because we're not in Ottawa next year. We're in Barcelona, so I'm sure we will circulate and present the results as soon as we possibly can. And that's all I've got to say. So keep calm and stay tuned. Thank you.
So that's great. And it's certainly great efforts of CRAB that these two projects have come out of it. So thanks to everyone there. And Ivana, sorry to cut you short there, but I think there are a few questions on the chat box. So maybe I will start to read those out one by one. The first one was for Pernille. Curious to know more about the Danish retinoblastoma survivorship clinic. What is the adherence to your survivorship clinic among survivors? How do you think those who attended the clinic might differ from the broader population?
Thank you. That's a really good question. First, I want to say that it's actually maybe a little random who is attending the clinic now. Some of the survivors attend the clinic after referral from the eye department. Some are referred after genetic counseling. Some have been transferred when they were just followed for years in the eye department and then automatically adapted into the RB survivorship clinic. So it is a bit random who is attending the clinic now, but I think there is an overrepresentation of individuals that wants to be proactive in order to take care of their own health. Individuals that think there is more benefit in knowing and be able to be proactive, and wants to be prepared instead of unaware of what might come.
Right.
The interesting study would be to see all of those that are not attending, if it is an active choice or if it's just random, they don't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the short answer, if there is a difference in those attending, it is probably individuals that prefer to be more proactive in order of taking care of own health in general.
Okay. I do have a bit of a question there again for you, Pernille. Just to wonder, how does this compare to survivorship clinics of other rare cancers? Have you compared what you found to others, and are they sort of the same? Or, you know, is there anything that's startlingly different for RB that we can address differently?
Yes, that's a really good question. So in Denmark, actually, we don't have cancer surveillance clinics for other rare cancer syndromes. They are starting to develop, but I think it comes to that genetics are organized different in Denmark, and the training for clinical geneticists, as I am, is different than in US, Canada, or UK. I think from my general experience with rare conditions, for example, neurofibromatosis, where there's also a cancer risk, I think there is the same pattern that we as individuals have different approach to risks in life. Some just take it as it comes, and some tend to be more proactive. Mm-hmm. And I think that me and the majority of us working in the healthcare system believe in being proactive. That is part of our nature. So I think there is, I think it's important for us to be aware of that there's this differences, various aspects in how to approach life in general and risks in life, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And that also does mean that other cancers are perhaps learning from us now. We did have a few other questions, but I think a lot of them got answered offline. Anna is looking for more medical student volunteers. So if there's anybody who's interested, we can float email addresses on the chat. The other question was for Sandra, I think, is answered something else offline. Is that right, Sandra?
Yeah, just a question from Vivian about don't forget Portuguese language. And my response was, you know, having looked at that comment alone, I'm sure there's going to be a way that we can harness the expertise of medical students. If we can work out a way how to do the translations, I think it would be a no-brainer to include multiple languages. We just got to get the survey in different languages, and then we need someone to translate it back into English so we can analyze it. But yeah, I think it will be very rich data, very rich data.
Okay. That's great. We do have a question for Ivana as well. Ivana, can you tell us more about the RB research community? Who did you want to join and why?
Well, thanks for that question. So anybody can join who's professionally or personally affected by retinoblastoma, and that would include parents, survivors, researchers, and health professionals, anyone from clinicians to child life experts. So we welcome everyone. I mentioned the focus was on Canadian research, but we welcome international participants. And they were asking why to join. So quick highlight: patients, they get an opportunity to learn about participating in research, as well as receive news about events and research results, and they get to shape research with their voice and their experience. Researchers learn how we conduct research with patient partners and connect with us if they would like CRAB to help facilitate that partnership. Also to participate in research projects and learn about our top 10 retinoblastoma research priorities, how Ashwin already explained, motivated their working group to tackle priority number 1. And health professionals partner on projects to offer their perspective of a general RB population, and they help us create materials that can be easily distributed at clinics. And they learn about the family experience. They connect with the families through the projects and through our events, and learn about programs and events that they could share with their patients that they would find beneficial.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions that I missed, perhaps? Okay, so there's a comment here that says research is more impactful when patients and families are involved. It's more likely to be used to influence healthcare and less likely to go unused. That's absolutely right. Right. There are a whole bunch of questions on translators in the chat box about patient community volunteer translators too. Sandra, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I've seen that, and I think I've just put a message out in the chat as well that, you know, in the meetings that we have, we've had many meetings with the research team, and we talked a lot about will we, won't we, how hard will it be, what will the challenges be, how are we going to do it, will we have the support? But I think all the chat that we're getting now, I think it's just that's the direction we'll take, and we'll just have to figure out a way how to get the survey translated into local languages, which ones we will do, and we'll reach out to the RB community, and I'm sure we've got enough expertise amongst us all to be able to do that, and it will make for a very, very special study, because, you know, a lot of research is in English, and often, you know, non-English speaking papers are even excluded from systematic reviews. So being able to include people and their experiences who come from non-English speaking backgrounds, I think will be a real point of difference and a very, very valuable study to progress with.